Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Thursday everybody. Yesterday, Wednesday, the US published a 48-page national security strategy document with its clearest articulation to date of the nature of US competition with China. In the introduction, President Biden warns that the US faces a, quote, decisive decade in its rivalry with China, end quote, and that, quote, China harbors the intention and, increasingly, the capacity to reshape the international order in favor of one that tilts the global playing field to its benefit, end quote. And finally, quote, we will prioritize maintaining an enduring competitive edge over the People's Republic of China, while constraining a still profoundly dangerous Russia, end quote. Yesterday, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, speaking on the strategy, expressed that the People's Republic of China is the, quote, most consequential geopolitical challenge for the United States, end quote, and that Russia, quote, lacks the access and spectrum capabilities of China, end quote. Sullivan also commented on the recent US export controls designed to frustrate Chinese advanced technology ambitions, expressing that the measures were part of what he called a small yard, high fence strategy by creating choke points for critical US technologies. He explains, quote, foundational technologies have to be inside that yard and the fence has to be high because our strategic competitors should not be able to exploit American and allied technologies to undermine American and allied security, end quote. The strategy document said the US was trying to support a free, open, prosperous and secure international order, and that to achieve this, the US would invest in American power and influence, building strong coalitions to, quote, shape the global strategic environment, end quote, and strengthening the military to ensure it was, quote, equipped for the era of strategic competition with major powers, end quote. Now, while we're on this theme, let's jump across the Atlantic to another Anglophone power as the UK sharpens its official China stance. Also, recently, the head of Britain's GCHQ spy agency, Sir Jeremy Fleming, warned that as his country and the wider West deals with the imminent problem of Russia, that it should not lose sight of the technological challenge from China. He expressed that Chinese tech company Huawei, quote, opened our eyes to the extent to which even the biggest businesses in China are ultimately wrapped up with the Chinese state, end quote. Fleming concluded with, quote, so we must also be clear that when it comes to technology, the politically motivated actions of the Chinese state is an increasingly urgent problem we have to acknowledge and address. That's because it's changing the definition of national security into a much broader concept. Technology has become not just an area for opportunity, for competition, and for collaboration. It's becoming a battleground for control, values, and influence, end quote. In response to the comments, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs expressed this week, quote, his statement has no factual basis. China's development of finance, science and technology is aimed at providing a better life for the Chinese people. It targets no one, still less poses a threat, end quote. Meanwhile, this week too, UK media is reporting that the new UK government will change its view of China from strategic competitor to threat, which would represent quite an escalation. The redesignation, it's reported, would bring the UK's official position towards China more in line with its stance on Russia. Okay, next up, Shanghai residents are really having a tough year. On Tuesday this week, it was reported that 2 water reservoirs at the mouth of the Yangtze River had been closed due to saltwater contamination issues. This sparked panic buying of bottled water, as many Shanghai residents, with still raw memories from only a few months ago of shortages during lockdowns, feared a potential shortage of drinking water. Quote, bottled water became the best-selling items, and our stock of bottled water has been cleared in less than 24 hours. It was obviously an irrational buying euphoria, because many people were not even aware of why others were buying it. They just followed others to buy some water too, end quote. On Wednesday evening on social media, complaints were posted by some residents, angry that they were unable to buy bottled water. Local government statements that everything was fine may have exacerbated the panic buying too, with some netizens on Weibo expressing that Shanghai government's credibility had been undermined after their performance during the lockdowns earlier this year. The announcement yesterday that supply from taps would be cut off in 10 residential areas certainly did not help calm nerves. Today, Thursday, local authorities again told residents that the situation is manageable and will be resolved soon. We will keep our eye on developments. Hey guys, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit the like button, and for anyone who wants to go the extra mile and help me keep China Update sustainable, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. This is a tremendous help for me and the channel. As always, thank you so much everybody for the ongoing support. And next up, the economy. In an exclusive report published today by Chinese financial media outlet Caixin, we learned that Beijing plans to chiefly use a relaunched loan program to finance major infrastructure projects, quote, as the government ramps up efforts to provide extra liquidity and shore up an ailing economy, end quote. The outlet writes that after an over 2-year pause, the People's Bank of China has tapped its pledged supplemental lending PSL tool to inject funds into the country's 3 policy banks, handing out a net 108.2 billion RMB, $15 billion in September, the first net monthly increase in lending via the tool since February 2020 and the highest in over 4 years. Pledged supplemental lending was first created by the central bank in 2014 in order to inject money into the economy through loans to policy banks for specific purposes. The policy banks enjoy a low interest rate and usually pledge high-rated bonds and high-quality credit assets as collateral. The relaunch of the PSL tool now suggests the government is relying on the policy banks to do the heavy lifting in providing more credit for the broader economy, especially as local government fiscal conditions, as we have seen, are very poor and worsening, and further monetary loosening is not an option due to external rate hikes. Caixin sources say that this lending will be mainly used to fund more than 600 billion RMB of infrastructure stimulus announced by the State Council in late June. We remember, according to the Central Financial and Economic Affairs Office, that spending will go towards infrastructure networks, industrial upgrades, urban infrastructure, agricultural and rural infrastructure, and so-called national security infrastructure, as well as projects already supported by local governments' special purpose bonds. Next up, we've already unpacked the most recent US-China technology, specifically semiconductor curbs, over the last few days. This is a large and ongoing story, so let's just move through a few quick related updates. The Wall Street Journal reports that US suppliers have paused support of already installed equipment at state-owned semiconductor integrated device manufacturer Yangtze Memory Technologies Corp. YMTC in recent days and temporarily halted installation of new tools. The suppliers are also pulling out their staff based at YMTC. The US outlet reports that US chip equipment manufacturers have dozens of employees stationed at the factory who, quote, play a critical role in operating the factory and developing its manufacturing capabilities as they bring an expertise on highly technical chip production tools, end quote. This will be just one of many Chinese factories and manufacturers in the mainland that will be affected by these new restrictions. Today, too, Japanese financial outlet Nikkei Asia reports that the chairman of Taiwanese electronics manufacturing company Pegatron, T.H. Teng, warned that the escalating technology war between the United States and China will be very costly, expressing at an industry event this week, quote, the controls brought by governments will, like the natural disasters of earthquakes, also bring casualties and consequences and reshape the industry supply chain, end quote. Next up for the economy, Beijing regulators this week are now finally putting into effect new rules, first outlined in April, designed to reform China's $3 trillion trust industry, an industry many commentators believe in much need for reform. Quote, the trust industry has been a focus of China's financial risk crackdown over the past few years, following a series of crises at Sichuan Trust Co. Limited, Shanghai-traded Anxin Trust Co. Limited, and others. End quote. Trust companies will have 5 years to adjust their businesses to the new business classification rules and exit unqualified operations, according to notices which were sent by the China Banking and Insurance Regulatory Commission to several major trust service firms this week. We remember back in April, the Commission issued draft rules redefining trust businesses into 3 categories: asset management, asset servicing, and charitable trusts. This is more consistent with international best standards and is believed to reduce systemic risk. It is also hoped to shift the industry away from financing generally. Now, one last quick update for the economy and for today's episode of China Update. Last month, US carmaker Tesla Inc. hit new monthly sales records in its China market, selling over 83,000 China-made electric vehicles. Yet another sign that China's auto market, supported by generous subsidies from the government, has rebounded. Tesla is the second biggest vendor of new electric vehicles in China, behind domestic car maker BYD. Also in September, Tesla finished upgrades to its Shanghai Gigafactory, increasing its capacity. However, this increased capacity is still not being utilized, as the company is still putting this expansion through testing. With this in mind, we should not expect Elon Musk to take too many public positions, likely to be displeasing to policymakers in Beijing. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. I will see you all tomorrow.